Welcome to Highly Sensitive, Happily Married, the podcast that teaches you to not only have an easier marriage as a sensitive woman, but to have one that feels more amazing by the day. Where you'll hear relatable stories, love advice that works, and coaching on how to have a marriage where feeling upset and disconnected is a thing of the past, and where instead a sense of loving connection and even fun and lightness is the norm. I'm Hannah Brooks, highly sensitive person, love expert, and marriage coach, and I'm so happy to be on this journey with you. Hello, my sensitive lovelies, and welcome to episode 145, where we're going to talk about when you are having a hard time accessing that feeling of love for your spouse. I know what that's like. I have been there. It really actually doesn't feel so good. And I want to help you with that, with shifting that and getting back to feeling that love that I know you like to feel, that you love to feel. But first, I just want to say a huge and full-hearted thank you. Thank you to those of you who have become podcast supporters, who have contributed to supporting the podcast to help it be sustainable for the long haul, and those of you who have grabbed the podcast map. That's the bonus, the reward you get for helping to support the podcast. So thank you. It really... Like every time I've seen a notification for those of you who have contributed, you don't know how much I appreciate it and how much it touches my heart. It really does. So I love and appreciate you so much. And if you're like, wait, what is this podcast supporter thing and podcast map? Well, just go head over to the link. And you can learn about it. There's different levels you can contribute. You contribute as little as $3. And what you'll get is this wonderful, I think it's like 11 pages of this booklet that I put together. It's beautifully illustrated. It will help you find and target the episodes of this podcast that are most helpful and beneficial to you and your unique marriage. So the link is, I'm putting it in the description of this podcast in the show notes. But you can also just go right over to the direct link, which is lifeisworthloving.com/support the podcast, all in one word. And on that same note, just taking this moment for a big gratitude fest for you all of you listeners, thank you so much for just listening, for being here, for being you, for wanting to work on your relationship. And I also want to thank everyone who has written a review of this podcast over on Apple. I don't know if there's other places you can write reviews, but I don't see them. If you put them there, that's fine. If there is, I love that too. But I wanted to share the latest one. I realize I've never really done that, or have rarely done that, and feel like I want to do that more. So this is a big shout out to TriniChick1218, who wrote, I love this podcast. My only regret is that I didn't find it sooner, but when I found it, I binge listened. I promise you will too. Hannah speaks from her heart, her experience, her knowledge, and what she says resonates so deeply. I finally feel like I'm not alone in my sensitivity, and I understand myself and how things affect me in relationships, primarily marriage, so much better now. Hannah gives guidance and actionable pointers. She gives examples. She brings in great guest speakers. She is awesome. I'm so grateful Hannah created this podcast and uses this forum to impart wisdom to us highly sensitive married women. So, just reading that brings me shivers again. I've read it a couple times, but reading it out loud gets me again. So thank you so much for that. And hey, if you want to leave a review as well, I would love it if you would. It actually helps the podcast reach more highly sensitive people and helps me impart my wisdom on more people. No, really, it really does help. So I just appreciate it so much when you take the 3 minutes it takes to do that. All right. Thanks for listening to my little gratitude fest. Let's dive in. So if you sometimes or often, for whatever reason, can't quite feel the love you want for your significant other, I want to share today a personal story that will help. And I want to share a story because I do believe that stories often help us understand things in different ways than just talking about a topic. I actually have a terrible memory. You don't know this about me. But it makes it hard for me to bring as many stories as I want to you on the podcast because I just don't remember things very well. I don't know if any of you have that issue too. But I'm bringing you a story today. But before I dive into that, I do want to point out that there are many reasons you might not be able to really access that love that you probably do really have under the surface for your spouse. But the really first important thing you need to know is that you yourself are always a part of that, why you can't feel it. Because no human being on this planet is actually unlovable. So although your partner may have some room to grow as a spouse, you are always the biggest reason you don't feel the love you want. And being willing to kind of explore that and what may be going on in you that's leading to that and how you can shift that is the way back to the love you want to feel. All right, so when I was 4 years old, I was obsessed with the little golden book, Sleeping Beauty. Some of you will remember that. I even had the record that narrated the story. Yeah, it was way back in the 80s. And I could follow along in my book, saying the words out loud. This was before I could read, right? But I could just follow along and I was able to turn the pages at the right time. And I pretty much had it completely memorized. So Princess Aurora, or Briar Rose, was totally my idol back then. I would dress up like her. To me, she was pure and loving and all things good. And if you go read that book now, looking back and reading that book now, she was obviously a truly sensitive person. But she was put under a sleeping spell and locked away, right? Caged away in her own castle by a huge thicket of briars. Really, she was locked away from love, from this prince who had fallen in love with her and she'd fallen in love with, right? So Briar Rose's story came flooding back to me some time ago while I was walking on my most beloved wild and isolated beach in Costa Rica. I was lucky enough to be on vacation, but although I was on vacation, which, theoretically should be relaxing and all that, many of you know as highly sensitive people, that is not always the case, right? Especially if you have kids or you're moving in a lot of different places. Anyway, I had been spending every minute with my family, including my mother-in-law. She was also there. And, all of them together, it's kind of a lot. 3 boys, fighting, lots of chatting. And my mother-in-law is also a very chatty person. So, kind of sneakily, without my full awareness, I found myself feeling off, a bit sad, a bit anxious, a bit irritable. Ultimately, I think I was rather overwhelmed and overstimulated, but it really felt like my heart had begun to feel locked away, as if it was caged in that thicket of briars, of prickers, right? Like the made of pure love Briar Rose who was sleeping in her walled-off castle. And it really did feel bad. Not how I wanted to feel or be. So some of you can relate to that, right? When we're feeling cut off from love, when we're feeling like who we are, our big hearts are just covered over by overwhelm, irritability, who knows what, could be lots of different things. It's we don't have access to who we really are in a way. It doesn't feel good. So I decided, when I became really aware of that, I asked my husband to watch the kids and I went off for my favorite therapeutic experience, which is alone time in nature. And in this case, by the ocean on my favorite amazing beach. So it was there in the quiet, this beach is wild and rugged and far away from most people, just super beautiful. So it was there that I was able to kind of come to my own rescue. Similarly to the way Prince Philip in the story finally cuts through the briars surrounding Sleeping Beauty's castle, right? He's like fiercely and lovingly searching for his true love. I was like that for myself. I was able to do that, to get back in touch with my own heart by calling on my own sort of inner hero. And although this was actually quite a few years ago when this happened, this was actually right as the pandemic was starting, before we were even fully aware it was about to happen. So early 2020. I wanted to share this story now, in part because I just remember it. Like, this experience was so strong for me, of actually being able to be my own hero in that way, to guide myself back to how I wanted to feel and ultimately how I wanted to show up with my husband and my family. Because as sensitive people, it is easy to kind of get a little off kilter in our wild world with our busy, full lives, and our sensitive systems, right? But it doesn't mean we're stuck that way or we're helpless, right? And this was such a vivid experience of this for me, that it really stands out in my memory. I actually remember it with my bad story memory. And I just think it's a really important thing to share with you all. So I know, as sensitive people living in this intense world, you also may find yourself blocked from your own source of love, right? You may feel off often, especially when you aren't taking the kind of great care of yourself that our trait or our sensitivity asks of us. But the truth is, you too can absolutely be your own Prince Philip, if you like that metaphor, or just your own hero in this regard of getting back to accessing your beautiful big heart and bringing that into your relationships with your spouse, with others. But you and me and all of us, we really can cut away that prickly hedge that blocks access to our hearts. And we don't need to wait for an actual Prince Philip to do so, or our sort of unprincely seeming at the moment partner, right? We don't have to wait for our partner for us to get back to our hearts. We can actually learn to be our own rescuer and lead ourselves gently and strongly back to love. And to do so, we first need to know what the briars, quote unquote, are that are blocking our hearts. What are those thorns? What is that thicket that is keeping us from our heart? And for me, on that particular day, as they often are for sensitive people, so perk your ears, they were too much time with others or caring for others, and not enough space for our own minds and hearts to decompress and process and settle and refuel with pleasure and relaxation. Or, like, in a larger sense, we could just call this stress and nervous system dysregulation, which can often come from kind of treating ourselves like a machine that has boundless energy to produce and give and interact, when that is obviously not the case at all, right? We're actual living beings, right? So this can come from, in other words, not lovingly caretaking this living body and soul that we are. And these briars, this sense of cutoffness from our heart, can also come from unprocessed emotions that are just kind of sitting there clogging your heart. These could have to do with your relationship or not at all. Still, as long as they're kind of sitting there unprocessed, they're going to make accessing that big heart of yours very hard. And that blocked heart feeling can come from various painful thoughts and fears that are just sitting below our conscious awareness. So this is always part of the picture. And these could be thoughts that are telling us that we ourselves need to be better in a million ways, like self-judgments and critical ways of seeing ourselves. And again, those could be related to your relationship or not. Or they could just be judgments of others as well, and resistance to the ways our partner or others are being and the things that they're doing. Like thinking he's such a jerk when he's sick, or he's overly extravagant in his spending, or he's not attentive enough to me, right? So those are just some examples of thoughts we could be thinking that are judgments or resistance to who and how our partner is. I've made a couple episodes on this, that could help you understand what I'm talking about here a little bit more. The first one is called Should Pain, which is episode 65. And really, whenever there's like a sense of he should, our partner should, they should in us, that means we're judging. And another really important episode on this, if you really want to understand this, like what are these judgments and these things that keep us out of our heart and sort of locked into resentment and all of this, the relationship rule book, it's a must listen. And that's episode 127. But our judgments of our partner and of our own selves, they really create a hedge of brittle, tough emotions, such as numbness, hurt, shame, guilt, disappointment, frustration, resentment, anger, that can really leave us feeling off kilter, uncomfortable, and disconnected, right? As if we cannot get into that heart of ours. And for highly sensitive people, the remedy is often simply taking some space for yourself, proactively, like I took that day. And that's not always enough, right? And if it's not, the next level remedy is using some reliable introspective tools that will really help finish clearing away those briars and reconnect you to a sense of care and warmth of heart or love, right? In other words, your heart. So on that day, my sense of being unable to access my love really called for this as well. Both going off and getting some space to be on my own, but also looking inward as to see what was really going on there, right? And doing some shifting of things inside myself. So this is always going to start with taking a close look, like I did on the beach that day. I was walking, taking a close look at the judgmental thoughts simmering below the surface, which again keep us out of the feelings we want to be having for the people we know deep down that we love, right? So just noticing what's really going on in your mind and what narratives, what stories you're clinging to in your mind helps those stories lose their prickly tenacity. And it opens up a bit of space in that thorny hedge around your heart. So just noticing, right? You've heard me calling that sensitive awareness or being transparent, authentic, and open with ourselves. So it's really just seeing what our brain is believing, what our brain is telling us, what our thoughts are, right? It's actually not very hard to do, but so many of us don't slow down enough to do this. And instead, we kind of cling to the idea that it's the world around us and our partner in particular that is causing this lack of love. But I promise, when you slow down and you really look, and you look long enough to really see your own mind, your own beliefs, and the places that your thoughts are taking you, you will find the source of your closed heart. You will find the briars, and then you can get to clearing them away. Now, this part can take some skill, some tricks, some developing this skill. The truth is it can be hard to actually see our own brain sometimes, which is weird, right? Because it's right here. You'd think you'd be able to. And of course, this is one reason coaching with a coach is so powerful, because it can help you see that, see what you can't see. But I want to give you a starting place today. So to get this awareness of the thoughts and judgments that are blocking your heart, one question you can ask yourself is simply, what am I thinking about myself or others right now? Or what have I been thinking about myself or about my partner lately? So if you aren't feeling super connected to your partner today, I'll give you a moment right now to ask that of yourself and to notice, right? To see those thorny thoughts. And I always suggest writing it down if you can. So I'm going to give you just a moment to take a look. And if you need to, you can pause this for longer. All right, give yourself a little bit more time if you need to by pausing. Otherwise, I want to tell you what I did next on the beach that day, and I still often do, which is to gently offer some understanding and care to myself. And yes, even to the part of me that judges myself and my partner or other people. So when I do this, I actually oftentimes tell myself under my breath, perhaps, it's okay, dear girl. Feeling cut off like this is part of being human sometimes. It happens to most of us. I still totally care about you. So offering that kind of compassionate attention to ourselves is often really magic. So I invite you to try it for yourself. Maybe even do this right now by pausing this episode. And once you do that, notice what you notice. Are there any shifts? Is there any sense of softening? Take as long as you need to explore that. So for me, that day on the beach, as is my normal experience when I do this, as I was walking and breathing on the beach and meeting myself with this kindness and curiosity that a good friend would, right? Like that same kind of curiosity and kindness. Every cell in my body softened. I slowly felt my heart kind of melting, like uncovering my own love. And for me that day, because I was really so out of my heart, this wasn't just one moment of doing this, right? Just one sentence going through my head, right? Every moment that I stuck with it really helped. And I actually stuck with it for maybe 45 minutes or so that day. So, and not just repeating the same exact sentence, right? But just being with myself in that way as I walked, as I absorbed the beauty around me, as I kept kind of uncovering what was going on in my head. And I just kind of stuck with this. And so if you don't feel this same sort of softening or that emerging access to your heart, just know that it can take a little longer than a moment. And of course, there may be some other things to troubleshoot as well. But I left the beach that day feeling back to my most loving, most joyful self, really ready to show up with a big smile and arms wide open to my family again. And my husband and I went on to have some of our most romantic, sweet moments together over the coming days. And all it really took for me was some time alone in nature, some inner excavating, some compassionate attention to myself, and a bit of courage and perseverance. Right? In other words, some being my own hero, my own love hero. So you too can really lead yourself back to love when you start to feel caged in by some briars and brambles, because love is not gone just because you don't feel it, right? It's just buried, and you really can excavate it and find it. Now, of course, I do recognize that for some of you, it may take more than these specific suggestions I've just shared, or more than a one-time passover of these suggestions. Sometimes it can be that easy, right? Like for me, it really was. A wee bit of time with these approaches can really wither those briars. But sometimes there is a giant hedge to work through in our relationships. Right? Like to hack through like Prince Philip did, right? Not just a briar or two to move. And in fact, without having spent a bunch of time developing a whole host of simple emotional and relational skills, I myself probably wouldn't have been able to make this shift so well that day. I'm actually really sure of that. The thing is, I was really versed in these skills. So when I needed to turn to them, they were like a magic doorway back to my heart, back to my affection and love and even joy in my relationship. So having that skillfulness made it easier. And And also, the truth is, not every time you feel locked out of your heart will it be for the same exact reason, right? So I've had times when it took a slightly different approach to get back to feeling love for my husband, like maybe processing old anger or hurt on purpose actively, or dancing wildly. So we also have to know how to be sort of a detective of what would be most helpful. But it will always, I promise, take looking inward and tending to what's going on in there inside of you and guiding yourself purposefully back to your heart. And although on this episode, I can't tell you exactly what in this specific moment of this specific relationship you're in is the specific work you have to do to get back to feeling love and connection with your partner. Of course, I can't tell you that until I actually talk with you and hear about what's going on. I can tell you right now that if you do nothing, if you don't slow down and you don't choose to look and you don't choose to shift things, you won't be able to access that love you want as much as you want, because it's not just going to fall out of the sky, right? And where there actually isn't a Prince Philip to do it for us. And to do this consistently and regularly, to be able to access that heart of yours and really feel so good about your partner and about your relationship, there really are some basic skills we all want to have, including the ones I've touched on, of course. And as an HSP, this will always include some level of tending to your sensitive nervous system. Because when that is out of whack, when that is dysregulated, which it oftentimes, unfortunately, can be as HSPs, you simply are not going to have deep access to that beautiful big heart of yours. Because if you think about it, when we're in either fight or flight or freeze, right, which is those states that's what we call those states when our nervous system is more in the fear primal survival state. In other words, dysregulated, like if it gets stuck over there. In other words, if you're afraid for your life because there's a threat like a tiger lurking in the bushes, it would not behoove you to be feeling all aflutter with love and tenderness and going gaga over some guy, even if it was your husband, right? You need your energy in those moments when there's a true threat to be on total alert and ready to defend yourself or run for your life, right? And our nervous system, when it's in those fight or flight state, it thinks there's a real threat, right? So nervous system work is actually about teaching your body a sense of safety, a sort of breaking the spell it's under of feeling it's threatened and unsafe. Because the truth is, 99.99% of the time in our modern lives, we're not actually under threat or unsafe. There's literally not something like threatening our lives. But our systems take, just like even too much stimulation as a threat. So as you gain access to more regulation, to that sense of safety in your system, you also gain more access to your heart and the part of you that naturally feels love and connection with others, including your spouse. And you also gain access to the part of you that can effectively communicate and successfully solve issues between you that arise, and the part of you that can learn to do that better, right? You learn so much better when your body feels safe. So this is in part why the beach walk was so amazing for me that day, because as a human, and even more so as an HSP, nature, being in nature, helps our nervous systems regulate. It gets us into that calm and connected, sort of smart, intelligent part of ourselves. And this nervous system regulation, this accessing this deep felt sense of safety in our bodies, is also why when you work with me, I give you the foundation you need to regulate your own nervous system with my course, Foundations of Emotional Well-Being for HSPs, which you currently get as a bonus when you join Treasured. my marriage coaching program for highly sensitive women. This will really set you up to be able to make the shifts you want in your relationship the most successfully and access your heart better than ever. And of course, I also give you in Treasured everything you need to detect what's blocking your heart and the skills to free it again so that you have the momentum and the energy and that sort of fueled desire to heal and mend and ultimately catapult your marriage into the best place it's ever been. Yes, it will take a little slowing down, a little introspection, a little developing of a few simple skills. And it may just be the best thing you have ever done for yourself and your relationship and your family and even your career. So if you're interested in learning more about this or even just curious about Treasured, or if you just know you're not as happy as you want to be in your marriage, you've got to read about Treasured over on the description page so you can feel out if it's right for you, as it has been for many other HSP women. You can find the direct link in the show notes or the description of this podcast, or just head directly over to www.lifeisworthloving.com/treasured. And one important thing to note is that I've shifted how long this program is to 4 months. I've really streamlined the process so that it doesn't have to be as long of a commitment for you. But you'll still get everything you need to make your marriage the loving, connected one that you really want it to be. All right, my friend, what I wish for you is the joy of being able to really access that big, beautiful, deeply loving heart of yours and to be able to bring that out so that it enriches and enhances the connection and intimacy and joy you feel in your relationships, including the one you have with your spouse. So enjoy accessing it more and more with the help of this story and these tips I've shared today, and be oh so well.